On the Jacob Buehrer Show today, I'm so happy to have on Jason Whitlock, who is a reporter. Well, not a reporter, he's a show host, but he does do some reporting um, with Blaze Media, and you've worked with a lot of different other media firms in the past, some who are not as friendly as others. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jake. Do people call you Jake or Jacob?
Either way.
All right, thanks for having me on, Jake. But yeah, I don't mind talking about my time at ESPN or Fox Sports or the Kansas City Star. Those, I'm very satisfied with the work that I did there. I'm not embarrassed that I used to work at some places that are pretty woke.
All good. Well, one thing about the show is I'm not far away from where you used to go to high school, Warren Central, where you were a good athlete, of course, ended up going to Ball State. Take me through a little bit about how you got involved from journalism from a young age, things like that.
Jake, I was a great football player at Warren Central, not a good one. But on a serious note, look, I was probably much like you. I'm speculating here, but I was just a huge sports fan as a kid. And my dad used to take me and my brother to Indiana Pacer games when I was a little kid. And so when I got to college originally as a scholarship football player, I didn't know much about college. I was more of an athlete and a social guy in high school. And so I thought I would be an accountant. I got in a math class at Ball State and was like, accounting's probably not going to be my thing. And a friend of mine said, hey, man, you read the newspaper sports section every day, and you have since you were a little kid being a sports fan. You should be a sports writer. And a light bulb flashed above my head, and I was like, oh, man, that sounds like a great idea. I could have a career where I just write about sports and travel to sporting events, and they would call that a job. And I was like, well, that's not a job. That's just me doing something I love. And so after my first semester at Ball State, I switched my major to journalism, and the rest is, I guess, history.
Interesting. And then, of course, after you graduated, you went to work at a paper firm in Kansas City, owned by the USA Today, if I'm correct now.
Not correct. Maybe now, but not correct then. My first job actually out of Ball State was in Bloomington, Indiana for the Bloomington Herald Times. That was my very first job when I graduated in 1990.
And what was that kind of like going from there to then bigger media as you expanded your career?
Uh, when I got to Bloomington, I had a lot of work to do and had to do a lot of catch up. And so I was just covering high school sports when I was in Bloomington. When I went to the Charlotte Observer, I was covering high school sports again. And then as my third job, I worked for the Ann Arbor News back when the Michigan Fab Five basketball team was big.
Jawan Howard.
Yeah, Juwan Howard, Jalen Rose, Chris Webber, and so I was covering the Fab Five, and that was my first big break. The Fab Five were a really big deal. I covered them every day, and then it was then after doing that for 2 years that I got my big break, getting a columnist job and getting the right to write my opinions for the Kansas City Star. And so I moved to Kansas City in 1994, worked there for 16 years, while also working for ESPN for a time while I was in Kansas City and for Fox Sports for a time when I was in Kansas City as well. And it was awesome getting to cover professional sports, getting to cover major colleges and doing all that traveling. This is back when you've never lived in this time, but newspapers used to be a really, really big deal. And they were a big deal at that time. And getting to write a column and be a columnist for the Kansas City Star was a really big deal. And I got to do that when I was 27 years old and did it for 16 straight years and then moved on and started working exclusively, I believe, at Fox Sports in 2010. Then went back for a second stint at ESPN in 2013 and 15. Then 5 more years at Fox Sports to now moving to Nashville and branching out on my own and partnering with the Blaze on my own platform and company, Fearless.
And what's really good about the Blaze, and a lot of people know of your show, of course, is well, you have a little bit more freedom to say what you want, compared to if you were to have a sports show on ESPN at 9 a.m. every morning. What's kind of the best part of that, you know?
It is the freedom of being able to talk about whatever I want and not have to espouse a certain point of view on certain issues. I get to, on my platform, cover things from a biblical perspective. I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. I get to talk about that. I get to talk about the sports world and the political world from a biblical point of view. You don't really do that on an ESPN or a Fox Sports. At a place like ESPN, they're really hostile to a biblical worldview. And they think, religion is too polarizing, or they just think religion is a negative, and so they kind of forbid you. And so I like being on a platform where I can espouse my views without limitations and without restrictions about my Christian faith.
And do you have I guess, do you enjoy interviewing people? Do you enjoy what's kind of the best part of the job then is of being a show host? Because of course you worked at a newspaper and had your own column and all that stuff. What's kind of the difference now as you host a show? You know, is your favorite thing interviewing people? Is that uh
I, my favorite thing is probably my opening monologue, where I get to uh, espouse a provocative or thoughtful point of view to start the show, and then bring on people to discuss the point of view I just laid out. And so we start my show most days with a thing that we call a fire starter, and then we bring on people to react. And it's like today we did a show where I was talking about Greg Popovich and how he was
yep.
popping off about the Second Amendment and all that. And so I unpacked why I think Greg Popovich is a bully and is stupid and not nearly as smart as he thinks. And then we had White come on.
Who
Royce
ran for
White,
Congress in Minnesota in Ilhan Omar's district.
yes. And we had him talk, and he was a former high level basketball player, first round NBA draft pick. Had him come on and talk about Popovich as well. And then Steve Kim, the Korean Cosell, I like to call him, he came on and talked about Popovich and some other issues. And so I like spouting my opinions, and then I like interviewing people about my opinion.
Interesting. And of course, you're based in a conservative state, although some people think that one of the Tennessee three members might potentially be the next U.S. Senator from that state, but I don't think that's going to happen. Beto O'Rourke 2.0. Would you ever consider potentially running for public office? You got a
No,
big base with the conservatives. Would you ever consider maybe running for
no,
mayor or no, you wouldn't?
no. I'm politics are about compromise, and I'm not real good with compromise. There's certain things I'm just not going to compromise on. My biblical worldview, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to put that into politics and have to compromise on any of my beliefs. I like the lane that I'm in. I think that it's important, as you see, Jake. The media is used to control people's thoughts, and to, in my view, turn them away from God at this point. And so I think working in the media sphere and giving people that still believe in God a platform where they can hear the world, politics, pop culture, sports interpreted through a biblical lens, I think I'm providing a great service to people that they can't get that anyplace else. And I think it's important to let people know, hey, you're not crazy for thinking this. You're not racist for thinking this. You're not homophobic for thinking this. You just have a biblical worldview, and there's nothing wrong with that.
For sure. And would you ever consider potentially, if you had the chance, would you consider being, and I just got to ask this last kind of political thing, if you were ever given the chance to be the press secretary to a Republican president, it seemed like you might do a decent job in that role. Would you consider that?
That would be amazing. I would have to
Being
think
a
about that.
reporter, I thought maybe
Yeah.
that might be
Oh,
down
that's
your
actually a
alley.
good that's actually but it's just what kind of restrictions would they put on me? Because I would go to town on the media and I wouldn't need some big binder book full of stuff. I would just go off the cuff and clown these guys for the stupid stuff and force them to talk about important issues. Uh I would have to think about that job. Yeah.
For sure. And then the last question I kind of have is what advice would you have if you were younger again, going through a sports career, going to journalism? What advice would you have for your own self if you were having to go through the route again?
The advice I would give someone like Jake is that be willing to go independent and build your own platform and not try to rush in a microwave to make it on some big platform because they're probably going to compromise your views. They're probably going to require you to say things that you may not believe in. And so it's better if you look at Joe Rogan, if you look
Yourself?
myself, you look at a Bill Simmons, there's actually more financial upside in building your own platform. You just got to be patient and you can't be greedy and make quick decisions. But if you stay the course and stick with it, it will work out for you financially and you'll have the right to actually espouse the opinions you genuinely believe in.
For sure. Like if Joe Rogan or you were to go on Fox News and get a show, you probably have less listeners over time because they're going to limit you to that 1 hour time slot there where you can make your show an extra 30 minutes, 10 minutes less this day, more freedom like that, like you just said. So very good point on that. I haven't
More
actually thought of it
freedom,
that way.
more freedom and less political pressure to about now. Like Tucker Carlson, I think says exactly what he thinks 99% of the time on Fox News.
But some of them are
Yeah, but I even Tucker, and I mean I love and respect Tucker, but it's just like I think they said, "Hey man, don't talk about the January 6 tapes anymore." He did it for a day or two, and then he hasn't really circled back to it, and I think that's because of the pressure that was put on Fox News, where if he were independent, he may have done 3 weeks worth of shows on that.
for sure. Which fingers crossed in a year he might be independent. We'll see if those rumors are true or not. Well,
Oh,
I
I wasn't
appreciate
aware of that. There's
yeah.
rumors that he may go independent.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. Jake, let me ask you this: you told me you're going to Purdue. What are you going to study? What do you want to do?
Communication. So kind of like yourself a little bit. Not journalism so much, but I think, Purdue's just a good school in the Midwest.
And not what I do. Are you into sports? What are you into? What do you like to talk most about?
Politics, sports. I've had on Jim Leland, Jerry Glanville. Both are wonderful people. But I've also actually had on Michael Dukakis, who is a Democrat for president, and I will be with our Secretary of State tomorrow, actually traveling to state, who's a Republican. So kind of all sorts of different things.
Jake, you're just a mover and shaker, man. I appreciate you having me on. This was an honor.
Thank you so much for coming on the Jacob Buehrer Show.